Where's my title card? Title card. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. Let me check my streams and make sure the stream is streaming. I have added YouTube to the stream today, so let's see if we can make these things happen. Okay. Got 2 of the 3 streams up. There we go. There's YouTube. Let me turn that off. Welcome, welcome. All right. It's 8 a.m. Central Standard Time in Austin, Texas, where I am broadcasting from. My name is Keith, and I have been a professional developer for 30 plus years. Currently, I manage Coding Bootcamp and have for the last several years helping people get into the industry. And I created this stream as a place for people in the job search to get together every morning, hang out, listen to a little bit of what's going on in tech, hear a little bit of my perspective from those 30 plus years, and just be a diversion and an appointment when you get those job applications out. So, being unemployed, changing careers, being laid off, nothing fun about it. Ain't nothing fun about it. Getting a job sucks. I don't care if you've been working in the industry a long time. You got a huge network and lots of experience. Putting yourself out there, getting rejections, maybe getting interviews and lowball offers and all the trials and tribulations that come with looking for a job. It's just not fun. Not fun. And, so much of it's a mental game. You just got to keep with the grind, keep working it, and understand that, though it will take time, you will get there. You will get there. Let's see where we at. I don't know where this is at. Let's see where this goes. Okay. So again, little by little learning this streaming software. No background in this, trying to figure all this stuff out. And figure it out as I go along. I've been adding this new stream every so often. I've been trying to figure out this software a little bit. But the goal is just get live, stay alive, and see what we can do about keeping people motivated and moving forward. One of the things I do is I track the job postings on Indeed.com as a reference to where the trend line is in the industry in terms of job postings. And we'll be looking at that. That's what these graphs on the screen show. And then we'll be talking a little bit about what's going on in the tech news. We're just going to scroll through the news of the day and, respond to that, reply to that, figure out kind of what that means, read the tea leaves a little bit about what that means for our industry. Our industry ever changing. We've been through a big shock in the last 18 months in terms of AI and what that means. And our industry has had to flex, has had to reorganize, had to change. And we as individual developers have had to kind of upskill and learn some new skills to become, try and future-proof if that is possible. Our careers, one thing is certain in the tech industry, and that is change, right? So let's get into it. If you want to throw a note in the chat, let me know where you're at and how you're looking at us. That would be great. Like to see that. And this is at its best a conversation. If you throw a chat in there with a question, I am happy to divert whatever I'm doing and dive into that. But if you have questions about being in tech, working in tech, getting in tech, different kinds of companies working for. I've worked for large Fortune 500 companies like Dell and Bizarre Voice. I've worked for lots of small independent companies. I did contract work for 10 years. I had my own startups. Um, so I've had a variety of experience, and I'm happy to chat about all that stuff. So throw a message in the chat, and I'm happy to engage there. But let's get to the job numbers. So I have been tracking for over almost 3 years now the job postings on Indeed.com, specifically JavaScript developers, because that's what our audience has been. That is starting to expand into other languages and other disciplines. But right now, the main data that I'm collecting is for entry-level JavaScript developers. But even from the cursory information that I've got from those other sectors, the trend lines are pretty much the same. There's a little variation here or there within the disciplines, but also within the experience level of the individual. But in general, when we look at these trend lines over time, they're tracking pretty close. So what does it say? In the last week, the information averaged out is starting to dip a little bit. This is the first time since maybe November that we've seen this trend heading a little bit down. Again, we're just reading tea leaves to sort of figure out why that is. There's been a lot of uncertainty because of what's going on in news, and specifically how that affects the tech sector. So there might be a little bit of that influencing things. It's hard to tell when we get to the granular numbers. You see that some of them did tick up a little bit since yesterday, so it's not a across the board dip, but something to keep our eye on and track for sure. The last 6 months, this trend line has been very healthy, heading in the right direction. And then in the last year, there's still a bit of a downturn, but once we get past this month, that'll level out for sure. And my guess is start to trend in the upward direction. More granularly, when I look at that data, when I look at mid-level, entry-level, and senior-level roles, and when I look specifically at remote as compared to in-person roles, what we're seeing, again, nice trend lines across the board. All these are heading up to the right. That's what we want to see. But we saw big flat, for the last month in a lot of ways, but also and specifically in the last 2 weeks, it's been pretty flat. There's a bit of a dip. And now, again, for the overall, we saw a bit of an uptick, a leveling off of the remote across the board. We want to stick with those trend lines and kind of keep our fingers crossed and hope that that companies feel like things are going to be better this year than they were last year, right? When they feel like they can access money, when they feel like they have the opportunity to grow, when they have the feeling of potentially merging, buying other companies, selling their companies to other places. They want to think about growth, and that means hiring people. A lot of talk about AI's role in companies these days, and certainly some sectors are being hit worse than others. But when you're talking about innovation, we really want to. Innovation comes from people. At the end of the day, innovation comes from people. So companies, while they never want to add more head count than they need to, they also, on some level, understand that you can only optimize yourself so far. You cannot grow through optimization. Right? So we'll see that. What are we doing? Looking good. All right. Again, I hit Indeed because it is about 15 to 20% of all the job postings in the United States are on Indeed.com. I got those numbers from a third party looking at this. Um, so, that is a significant enough number that we can get trend lines from it. If it were 1%, 5%, you might say, well, that's not enough to really be statistically significant, but you get to 15 or 20%. Yeah, you've got enough of a distribution there that you can really sort of take some solace in that the numbers that you're seeing on these graphs are pretty solid across the board, right? There's a variety of stuff there. The other thing I like about Indeed is this ability to filter, this ability for me to sort of slice up that data and get a better sense of, in particular, if you're trying to break in and you're looking for an entry-level role, what does that look like compared to if you've got, 2-3 years experience and you're looking for a mid-level role, or in particular, a senior level role. There's a lot of talk these days about how AI is going to get rid of all the entry-level roles, and all the entry-level work will just be managed by mid-level and senior level developers. I've got a lot of opinions about this. Not particularly, happy with this approach or this thinking. Where do you think you get mid-level and senior level from? You get it from growing junior levels. You can't just not hire any junior levels ever again and expect that senior levels aren't going to retire, and mid levels aren't going to become senior levels and then retire. And where do the rest of the where's the next generation come from? That's been my focus for the last few years, is really kind of figuring out that next generation, helping that next generation enter the workforce. And so I've been very focused on that, and paying attention to these numbers in particular. So I am also on LinkedIn. Not only are we broadcasting from LinkedIn, it looks like we have at least one viewer currently from LinkedIn. I'm not doing a whole lot to publicize these. I've not figured out the whole grind of getting out the scheduling, everything. I'm still new to this stuff. I'm figuring it out as we go along. Certainly, if you want to share this stream with anybody who you feel like could benefit from an appointment while they're getting out their job applications, please feel free to spread the word about this stream. I would appreciate it. Again, we just went live today on YouTube for the first time, and we're going to continue to do that. We'll be streaming live Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, on Twitch, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube simultaneously, trying to reach the people where they are. Reach the people. Looks like we had a headline here. Breaking news: U.S. added 143,000 jobs in January. That headline doesn't tell me if that's a good number or a bad number, but it is a breaking number. We'll take a look at that. Job searches lasting 6+ months. This is what our graduates have been seeing. It's always more challenging for somebody breaking into an industry to get in, because their resume doesn't show any pertinent work experience, and so it's going to be harder for them to stand out in a stack of resumes for a particular job. But some of our graduates are getting jobs. It's the ones who are consistent, who are getting up every morning, who are working not only the job boards, but also their network and a whole host of different ways to kind of get themselves noticed and that. So we want to talk about those kind of things too, if that comes up. But let's look at these quick stories here. U.S. added fewer than expected jobs last month. Okay. As the fires in Los Angeles and unusually cold weather elsewhere weighed on the labor market. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago when we saw that those job numbers flatten out. Things really took off like a rocket in November and December and at the beginning of January. And I was very hopeful that this thing was really going to take off and those jobs were going to exceed all the numbers from last year. But everything flattened out, and part of it was because of those Los Angeles fires and the weather interruptions. Flights were canceled. People were stay at home, and in a return to office world, you never know how many people can work from home uh, these days, and how that can affect people just getting out job postings, and or um, you know, getting things moving there. So uh, the forecast was 170. We got 143. Generally, those are not good numbers, but again, we like to think that the weather's behind us. People are rebuilding in Los Angeles. Rebuilding means moving businesses to another location. Sometimes it means adding new people uh, in the process of rebuilding. So in the mixed report, the unemployment ratio was ticked down from 4% to 4.1%, while the average hourly wages went up. And job gains in November and December were both revised by a combined 100,000 positions. Yeah, I mean, this is a big, complex country with a lot of different job sectors. And so whenever they make these forecasts, again, they're just picking a number. They're making a guess. They're looking at some historical data, and they're going, well, based on this, just like what forecasting the weather, you know, they're wrong more than they're right. But how much they're wrong for is always the question. And the markets always react in some way, um, but we'll see. Continued strength, says this person. There are many countervailing factors in the data for January, numerous revisions of types to wildfires and winter weather. The story the data tells is difficult to parse, and it's best to examine a new release as a snapshot rather than a comparison to prior months. Yeah, I think that's true. Let's see, we got job searches lasting 6+ months. We have opened up our audience to not just new people getting into the industry. We changed our business model over the last year to include people who are upskilling, who already have work, or maybe we're just laid off and are looking to add some more skills to make themselves more marketable in the job search. And I recently had a data scientist who was in our program, and she was getting a fair amount of responses and a number of offers. She got into the final job decision for 3 different companies, only one of which really kind of met her salary demands. But she, in that process, she went through 3 rounds, 4 rounds, in 5 rounds, I think, in one case of these interviews, and they were not in a hurry to pull the trigger and to make the final offer. Everybody was kind of taking their time going into the fall last year. Some of that is expected because of holidays and stuff. But even her, who has had lots of experience, worked for a Fortune 500 company, had a really great resume, and was getting responses. It still took a long time for them to make a decision. I think they had a lot of people to choose from, and weighing their options, and then the negotiations that followed once offers were given. All that stuff adds up in time. So when somebody says the job search lasts six months, like that's 6 months of until they get a job. But depending on who they are, that might be 6 months until they really start on average getting noticed and replied to, or it could just be that they're getting interest all along, but that process is just taking longer. Tech in general is an industry that is slow to hire. This has always been true, but in the last 10 years, I think that this has been increasingly true. Companies understand the expense of a bad hire. They, especially for developers, generally speaking, have an onboarding process. They have to learn about the code base. They have to understand the business model. They have to figure out their role and how best to add themselves to it. And when I've been onboarded at different companies, there was 2-week process when I was at Bizarre Voice before they even gave me a computer. They're like, we want you to learn all about our business. And every day we were going to different aspects, meeting different teams on different verticals to kind of understand how the business worked. And many tech companies, have sort of taken that model and really understand we're not just buying a little part to fit in a machine that we've made, but in order to get the best out of our employees, they really need to understand our business, and that takes time, and that's an investment. And a bad hire is throwing away a lot of money. So companies are a little more drawn out in their process for sure. This job search is less than 6 months. It's not specific to the tech industry. This is across the whole board. But my guess is the tech industry tends to drive that number higher. The interview process for fast food, not so long. For Uber, not really that much, right? So what has been your experience? How long have you been looking for a job? Throw that in the chat. Let's talk about it. Then the other thing I like to do is just hit the news, kind of see what's going on in our industry. Actually, I've got a couple of other things I want to do before I just do that. These are stories that I picked up the week but didn't get to because I ran out of time. Amazon tackles AI hallucinations. So, this is when you have a technology that is doing predictive text, it is guessing what the next word or chunk is in a row. It's just, on some level, every new addition to the thing that it's producing is a guess, and that guess is wrong. So some percentage of the time, based on what you're asking for and how much of that is seen before, and it's in its training data. So this idea of AI, these LLMs being a fact machine, has never made sense, because if it's similar, if what you're asking is similar to something else, it might get that confused in terms of its predictive nature, and say two things in a row that are perfectly reasonable and correct, and then the third thing just randomly doesn't fit. One of these things does not like the other. We've seen this over and over again if you use LLMs, whether it's for code, whether it's for questions. Generally speaking, the more data in its data set, the better it's going to be. So if you're talking about just plain writing, helping you with writing an email or that kind of thing, it's seen billions of emails in its training data. So it's going to be pretty tight about that. But if you ask it for information for a framework that's not well documented or is new, the code that it's going to spit out is not going to be super useful. It's going to get confused. It's going to mix it up with other things that are similar but not exactly the same. And if you've been using AI like I do to assist you with the code, you will see as much wrong information as right. And if you've got a lot of experience with this, like most of us do, you can spot those problems and head them off at the pass, reprompt it in a better way to help with that. But this idea of hallucinations is baked into the process. It's just baked into the process, right? Because if it didn't hallucinate, in a sense, it would have to know exactly what you want. That thing that you would want, it would have to be in its database. It have to see that a lot, because again, it's a statistical model on some level. If the thing that you want is out there, it's in the training set, but it's not the most prominent thing in the training set, well, it's going to go and give you the thing that is more, has been in its data set more, even if it's not quite the right thing. This is a problem with the averaging out of the information, right? When somebody talks about the value of these LLMs, it's what they often say is like, this is not going to be an experienced top of the 10x person in a role, whether it's a marketing person or a writer or a coder. It's not going to be the top of the level, but it's going to be a good mid-level person. It's going to be a good mid-level person. And that's because it averages out. It sees the best code that's out there. It sees the worst code that's out there, and then it sees the bulk in the middle, which is kind of all the average code that's out there. And so, oftentimes that's good enough, and we all can benefit from that. But because they have so much data that they're trying to shove in there, of course, there's a lot of bad stuff in there. Again, this is why we run into these issues with LLMs and being biased and racist and all that stuff. Because guess what? That's all in their training set. It's all in their training set. So as long as there's, racist information and wrong information, made up information and fake information and lies on the internet, there will be some version of that in these LLMs that will be revealed when you prompt. That's a bit of a soapbox on the topic, but Amazon's trying to fix this by banking on something they're calling automated reasoning to tamp down those hallucinations in order to attract more enterprise business. Companies. There's been a lot of talk in the last week about the new administration applying AI to different government processes, and how that's going to work out. Again, you got to put safeguards in place, right? You've got to filter the information before you send it off to the LLM, and then you got to filter the information coming out of the LLM, and that's software development, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the LLM, doesn't know what we want. We're the determiner of, what it gets back. What we get back from it is good or not. So that's just always going to be a bit of a cat and mouse game, trying to figure out the best way to filter that information and make sure that what we return to our users is the most useful and true, if that is the thing, in there. What we incentivize. The first AI software engineer is bungling the vast majority of tasks it's asked to do. So this is specifically talking about, I think this I saw a similar article to this, about Devin. So I don't know if you've played with Devin, if you've been tracking that at all. But Devin came out to a big fanfare. Oh, Devin's the first programming agent. Companies can hire Devin, and they don't have to hire a human. And Devin will, build applications for them and be able to, write the code, test the code, do all this stuff. And of course, that doesn't work so well. I mean, again, AI can be assistive, but just for the same reason, you need a human to determine whether or not what you've asked for is what you've gotten back. And when it comes to code, people who don't code, they think of nerds as not being very creative. The reality is we start with a blank page, just like a novelist, right? Somebody comes to us with a bunch of pixels and they say, hey, we need to turn these pixels into code. Well, you could hand those set of pixels to a dozen developers, and they'll give you a dozen different blocks of code that might look exactly the same at the end of the day. One of them might be a little bit more efficient than some of the others, but in general, they all kind of look ultimately the same, right? The code that it takes to build an application, a modern web application, whether it's consumer-facing or an internal tool, there are creative choices made in this process all the time by coders, right? And so when you ask an LLM to give you some code, it's reading code written by humans uh, that have made a bunch of creative choices. Some of those are good and efficient. Some of those are less efficient but still work. Some of those are just broken, don't work. Um, and it's going to spit out code. It's going to predict a string of code and give it to you. And ultimately, it doesn't know what's good code and what's bad code. It's just making predictions based on what it's seen before. So uh, we're going to need humans in the loop. Those humans are going to be assisted by AI as we move through. I've been building apps with AI. I've been not big apps, small apps, limited scope, but I sat down and I've been pretty successful in the last couple of months of just sitting down on a weekend and going like, I want to build this thing. Let's see how far AI can take me. Um, and I'll say of the probably 5 experiments I've done in the last 4 months in terms of just sitting down and trying to get it to do the whole thing, only one of them was able to generate every line of code. But again, scope was small. Didn't have things like big databases and authorization and that kind of stuff. Sometimes it gets that stuff right. Sometimes it doesn't. It's a mixed bag. But whenever I've tried to push it in terms of complexity, it starts to fall apart, right? It gets lost in context. We're seeing context windows get larger. Google just announced much larger context windows, and that'll be interesting. I haven't tested that one yet. As the context windows get a little bit bigger, hopefully this will get better. But we're still in a world where this computing takes a lot of resources, and there are a lot of people who want to use it. So there are going to be some limitations with that. And until we figure out some crazy breakthrough, this myth that we don't need programmers anymore, while seems persistent in the headlines, is just not true. It's just not true. What do you think? Are you concerned AI is going to take your job? Throw that in the chat. What do you think? All right. Phishing tests, the bane of work life, are getting meaner. Yeah. This is the thing. If you pay any attention to this, one phrase you'll hear all the time is that the real threat is less from AI and AGI and superintelligence, and more from humans who use AI. Right? Because again, what does the AI want to do? What does it want to do? It doesn't want to do anything. It does what you ask it to do. And just because it gets better at that by a percentage every time they come out with a new model, it's still not self-directed, right? It's still not waking up in the morning and trying to figure out some interesting thing to do today. It's waiting around for you to initiate a process. Now, we're starting to play around with this idea of agents, and what does that mean? And can you ask it to do a series of things that will take some time and take some reasoning? That word frustrates me. And have it go through a series of things. Sure, you can build an outside process around that. It's kind of like a traffic cop. All right, go do this. When it comes back, all right, based on that, let's go do this. Based on that, let's do this. But the idea of it being self-directed, again, humans have a problem with that. Waking up in the morning and figuring out what we're going to do. But where there is an incentive, when you place the incentive correctly, you're more likely to get a result. In the world of machine learning, this is the key, right? If you can put a number to a thing and tell that thing to make a billion experiments, and the experiments, they get closer to the correct number, you can create some amazing little AI agents, right? You see this starting to experiment 10 years ago with video games, right? Video games put out scores and numbers you can track, and they, teach you how to play Super Mario. They teach you how to do it because it's, again, you're tracking to a specific number. Do you get closer to the goal or farther away from the goal? If it's closer, let's iterate on that. This idea of machine learning has been around with us for a while, and where it has been successful, um, it is where you can very clearly design the best outcomes in a way that's measurable and meaningful. Um, Most of life isn't like that. I get up in the morning and I have to decide what to do with my day, and I don't know which of these things is going to move the needle in my day more times than not. Right? I got a bunch of things on my to-do list today. There's always talk about what's that one thing that'll make everything better, and put that first and do that. Like, sometimes you can figure that out. Other times you have no idea. The one little phone call it's fourth on your list turns out to be the person who connects you with somebody else who makes a big shift in the focus of your day, and sometimes your life, right? You don't know where that's coming from. You have no idea, right? And you don't even know how to grade it. Look, I had the phone call and he said he'd follow up, but you never know. He might follow up or he might not follow up. But a week later, everything changes, right? It's hard in the real world to, incentivize these models in a way that is meaningful. Right? It's just going to be challenging. But you know what's easy? Creating scammy phishing stuff. Did we get access to somebody's bank account and drain it? Yes, we did. All right, let's do more of whatever we did there. If we didn't, let's not do that. And setting up those processes are, relatively speaking, trivial. So guess what? Where you have a clear incentive and a clear way to test that, there's going to be a lot more of that. There's just going to be a lot more of that, right? Again, AI is not the problem. Human beings are always the problem, right? You create a weapon, you create a tool. Sometimes those things are confused interchangeably, right? You create a car, you can go very far, or you can smash it into a building. Um, this is the way the world works, right? All right. Phishing tests. What else have we got? Make sure the stream's still going. Some problems with my internet connection earlier in the week. That was all sketchy and blinking out, but I've got fiber to my house. I should not be having these problems, but everything looks good today. Okay. iPhone. Phone. Lots of phone stuff. What's going on in the phone world? Is there some conference going on? Acer just announced 2 great gaming laptops with great specs and sleek designs. The idea of a gaming laptop 10 years ago was kind of a joke, but we've gotten to the point where you can do some impressive things with laptops these days, and they're not, $5,000. Foldable displays, crease. Americans won't get one of the coolest foldable smartphones. Shows only minimal crease. The hated foldable screen crease may finally be going away. Interesting. Yeah, I talked about this earlier in the week. I still have not even touched or held one of these foldable screens. I'm curious about them. I find them interesting. But I've also, in my own personal life, kind of gone with the cheapest, least distracting phone option. I don't have any social media on my phone. I open up my app because of my Fitbit. I carry my Fitbit around. I'm going to check my health information and messaging. Those are probably the 2 things that I use it for the most, or check the weather. Man, the weather. It is warm these days in Texas. It's supposed to be in the 80s this weekend. What the heck? 4 years ago, this whole state was thrown into a blizzard where the power went out for days in some instances. And this February, it's a heat wave. My grass thinks it's spring and wants to be cut. I like the heat. I'm not complaining about the heat. Not at all. I do not like the cold, but I'm not a big fan of cutting the grass in February either. What you gonna do? It's a trade-off. Life's a trade-off. Google's AI-generated Super Bowl cheese ad has some holes. Okay, watch Pixel's new game. I haven't been looking at the Super Bowl ads. I saw some headlines that they're starting to leak. Not a football guy. I have a daughter who's in a college band at Texas State, and so because of that, for the last 3 years, I've gone to more football games than I ever have. But the Super Bowl has never been a big draw for me. But those ads, everybody wants to see those ads every year. iPhone 17. Football Manager canceled. Sports games. I don't play sports games either. I love a good sports movie. I'll watch a sports movie any day of the week. But sports games and watching football and basketball, I just don't have the patience for it. I do like to watch a clip. I was watching some basketball clips last night before I went to bed of these crazy shots from out of the middle of nowhere, falling down and tossing it up and catching these things. I do like to watch those videos from time to time, but not a sports guy. I couldn't tell you the rules of basketball. The whole traveling thing, I don't really understand it. Who's counting the feet on the ground? Is there somebody whose job is to count the feet touching the ground? It's mystifying to me. I don't know anything about it. Don't know anything about it. Let's see what Gemini. Yeah, Gemini's getting some headlines, and it's supposed to be cheap. They keep calling it a new class of cheap AI models, but we don't know what the cost of these things are because it's in these companies' best interest to get you hooked on their API as opposed to their customers. And tech has a very bad habit historically of subsidizing the cost of their thing in order to get users, right? We see this in every aspect of tech sector, especially where there's venture capital. Somebody comes up with an idea, seems like a good idea. They've got a little bit of traction. They raised a bunch of capital. They spend a ton of money on marketing. They undercut the price of their competitors because they've got a big, huge chunk of cash in the bank, and their goal is to grow through low cost, and then eventually become profitable by turning the price up. But until they hit that point, which most companies don't, they fail. But until we hit that point, we don't know the actual cost. So you can say it's a cheap model, cheap for the users right now because that's what they're charging us, but we don't know what the real cost of it is and how much they're subsidizing it. So these questions, of course, efficiencies, and with DeepSeek out there, we are finding new techniques to run them with less resources. But again, these are all privately held companies or subsidies of publicly held companies who are just not showing their books. It's like, we don't know. So, this is great for us right now. We're building apps on top of these models. But until, they want to be profitable, which none of these companies are. I mean, the companies might be profitable for other business that they're doing, but the AI divisions are, bleeding billions of dollars as an industry. We haven't really found that killer app in the sense that these companies have created the app that everybody wants to pay for and pay what it's worth and pay a profitable amount. I mean, I pay $20 a month for Claude. I pay $20 a month for ChatGPT. I pay for Cursor. I pay for a couple of those things. They're not being profitable at $20 a month. I don't care who you are. Like right now, we as consumers are getting the best of this deal because it's being subsidized by venture capital. But at some point, that's, unless there's this huge decrease in the cost of energy, huge decrease in the cost of the price to train these models and run these models, at some point the shoe's got to drop and they got to start charging. I mean, we saw this, for Google had all these APIs, these great APIs, the mapping API, all these APIs that 10 years ago, probably longer now, 15 years ago, all their APIs were open. Everybody could build apps on top of them. If you wanted to add Google Maps to one of your apps, great. Just start hitting it all day long. All you have to do is trade your users' data. And most people were willing to make that trade. And then they're like, wait a minute, we could be charging for this. And essentially overnight, like thousands, tens of thousands of apps kind of went away because, it's cool to make an app and throw it out there that might be useful, but there are a lot of useful things that people will not pay for. This is what the internet was sort of built around, this idea of like, hey, there's a big useful thing here and nobody's charging us for it. But can't make money other ways on ads or whatever to justify it being around. So, until companies actually start putting a real price to these things, we don't know where this stuff is going. But enjoy it while we can. Maybe you're the one to make the killer app that's going to change everything, turn it all around. We'll see. Video games, lots of video games in the tech news. New Nintendo patent suddenly confirms exciting Switch 2 rumor. Nintendo patents show that the Joy-Con can work like a mouse, and so might a new controller. AMD work like a mouse, and so might a new controller. Okay. Yeah, a lot of speculation about whether that could be a mouse. And Nintendo's always the one, since the Wii, it's been shaking things up. The 3DS, the DS, Xbox, and PlayStation have just been concerned about the number of triangles that they could put on the screen and the refresh rate. And Nintendo's like, well, maybe we should think a little more outside of the console. And it's been very profitable for them. Very profitable. Game Boy Advance and Nintendo Switch Online adds Wario Land. GBA library. This has been interesting, right? Like this idea that this retro game stuff is finally being embraced by these companies and finding new ways to put it out. It's not the same, of course, right? If you play an N64 game without an N64 controller, it wasn't really designed for your Wii controller or your Switch controller. So the experience is a little different. But previous to this sort of generation and their approach to these old games, everything was abandonware, right? Like all these games that we played in the 80s and the 90s, when the operating systems changed and the consoles upgraded, oftentimes they were not backwards compatible, and that stuff was kind of going to be lost on the scrap heap. But nope, companies are starting to get wise and going like, hey, remember that game that we charged them for when they were 14 years old? We can charge them again for that when they're 36 years old. And it's not a bad thing. Again, all those artists, all those programmers who worked on that stuff back then, their work was lost. So much of the work that I did in the 90s has been lost to time. Pre-internet internet Wayback Machine. Before that, like all that stuff, if we didn't save that stuff on CDs and even CDs 25 years old are getting, are breaking down and becoming hard to read data off of. So it's challenging so much of the work of, again, programmers and artists and writers. And voice talent has been lost to the ages in a way that, some book from the 1800s is still around, some copy of it. Lots of them lost, of course, too. Physical media always has a chance of going away, but we won't have CD-ROMs in 100 years that are still functional. That's just, the technology will break down over time. VHS tapes from the 80s, those aren't holding up very well anymore these days either. How are we doing on time? Got about 10 minutes. Okay, if you're new to joining, my name is Keith. I'm a professional developer. I've been working for over 30 years. Currently, I'm working as managing a coding boot camp in Austin, Texas. That boot camp's been around for 11 years. I started part-time with them almost 8 years ago. And in the last 3.5 years, I've been managing the company, helping people break into the industry. And I created the stream as a way to be an appointment. If you're out there in the job search looking for a job, consistency, getting up early, getting a caffeinated beverage in you, getting some enthusiasm about throwing some apps out into the ether and hoping for a response is a challenge. And the people who are successful are consistent with it, are working all the angles, and we're here to just be an appointment. I'm going to be here. You should be here too. We'll just make an appointment every Monday through Friday. We're going to be hanging out together while you're getting those apps out and chatting about text. So I'm your appointment wherever the streams are. We're on Twitch, we're on LinkedIn, and we're on YouTube as of yesterday. So feel free to leave a comment, to share it with your friends who are also in the tech industry and maybe finding themselves laid off in the fall of last year and out there. Maybe they've burned through a month of their severance pay and they're like, I got to get back into this. Give them my link and tell them to come hang out. And we'll grow this stream and help more people. How to block your phone from tracking your location. That seems like a fool's errand to me. Why would you want to do that? I mean, obviously we know why you want to do that, but there's so many things on your phone that needs GPS. That is an unrealistic expectation. I mean, unless you're a criminal and about to do some criminal things, or maybe you're going to cheat on your partner and you don't want to be tracked. I suppose in that instance, you might want to go completely dark. But just day to day, moving around, I need my Google Maps. I need to see what the traffic is like when I try and head across town, to see where the accidents are. I need my Fitbit to track me when I'm taking a walk around the neighborhood to see how far I've gone. I have so many apps that use GPS. Yes, this is the trade-off that we give in modern life. The actor allegedly claims 20 million logins for sale. Oh, yeah. Data breaches everywhere. Switches a time as well as a date. Warhammer 40,000. Never played any Warhammer. Man, that, if there was ever something where the lore was so deep that it scared you off, that feels like one of those things. It's like, oh, that seems kind of interesting. And then you spend 30 minutes digging into it and you're like, oh, there's too much here. I can't. This is not just a hobby. It's not just a game. It's a hobby. It's not just a hobby. It's a lifestyle. Getting into all that stuff is crazy. Any Warhammer fans out there? The 25 years into The Sims, EA is still making the same mistakes. Okay. Sims was a big deal when it came out. Very big deal. And it kind of went away. Now it's back. Big discounts, charging accessories, Baldur's Gate, lots of video game stuff. They're just constantly putting out the news releases. They wanted bolder, not bigger. The $1.5 million home renovation made it happen. Why is this in tech? You sneak these articles in here, and I'm not sure why they do that. Trump's political stunt to rescue ISS Austrians is moving forward. Yeah, it was a weird one. I mean, the plan was already in place to get them down. And it wasn't that long from now. I think it was like March, maybe. But they were supposed to come down anyway. So, like, that seemed weird. Phone stuff. You can now use ChatGPT web search without logging in. ChatGPT search is now free to everyone. Metal Gear Solid. What are we doing? How did this porn app get on my iPhone? Apple lashes out at iPhone porn app maker. First approved iPhone porn app is coming to Europe. Apple blasts EU laws after first porn app comes to iPhones. Interesting. Again, not an iPhone user, so I don't generally see this stuff. But I guess from just reading these headlines, the EU opened up rules so that they didn't have such a stranglehold on the app store, and because of that, now I guess porn has slipped through and is now on some phones, which they have been, for obvious reasons, against. Mercedes-Benz is practically begging people to buy its EVs with $15,000 discounts. No one is buying them. I mean, we've been in a anemic economy for a while now. Buying luxury cars probably has less to do with the EV part, more to do with the fact that people just aren't spending that kind of money on those luxury cars as much. Monster Hunter Wilds. Kids are big Monster Hunter fans. Steam now warns you that if early access game you're eyeing has been abandoned by its devs. Oh, that's good. That's good. It's easy to go into early access. I'm trying to get a game up on Steam right now that I've been working on. And I've got a Steam page up, and I'm trying to figure out that whole system, learn all that stuff. It's a lot to learn. But yeah, abandoned games are a problem, especially if you paid for early access. It's one thing to have a demo up and then you never finish the game. It's another thing if you charged for your early access and then you're like, didn't sell enough, so we're going to not finish the game. Starlink on your phone. We talked about this earlier in the week. Satellite phones, satellite access phones would be cool. It would be cool. All right, we're getting to it. Again, we look at the job search data. We look at the trends in the job in the tech industry in terms of job postings. We do that every day from Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Central Standard Time. And I always say, I've been doing this for several weeks now, I always say, don't sleep on the weekends. I look at these job postings every day, including the weekends. And guess what? I'm seeing new job listings on Saturdays. I'm seeing new job listings on Sundays. And if you're taking the weekend off, so are a lot of people. And if they're taking the weekend off, that means that you don't want to take the weekend off. You want to get up on a Saturday morning before the family gets up, before the kids get up, and all that racket, and check the job postings and get into the top of the stack, right? You want as little competition for the job applications that you're applying for. So, one of the ways to do it is, look for jobs when everybody's taking a holiday. Get those job applications out. Get to the top of the stack. You're going to be more likely to be noticed and reviewed. Whether they call you is another story. But if they don't ever see your content because you're too far down, you're the 51st one to apply for that job, chances are they're going to find 5 or 6 good candidates before they even get to your application. So we want to get up early every day. We want to get those apps out, and we want to be as creative as we can to keep on people's radars. So there we go. Hope you have a good weekend. It's going to be a warm one in Texas, in my neck of the woods. I'm going to take advantage of that. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you